What's up, Star Wars Unlimited fans? We're here for the Luke Green Masterclass, and with us we have Phil Ritchie. How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing good, Loopy. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us today. So you did fairly well at the Orlando 5K?
Yeah, I exceeded a lot of people's expectations with this deck for sure. I saw a lot of the right matchups too in this, which helped. As anybody's success in a big tournament like that, I think you have to see the right things in Swiss and play well. So yeah, Luke did amazing.
Right. And I commend you. I mean, I'm trying to get all the interviews. We had a deck that was not thought of as one of the top 3 decks win. Then I would say Luke Green was not thought of as one of the top 3 decks, and you took 3rd, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So congratulations on your run. So before we get into the cards, tell us about how you came to Star Wars Unlimited itself. I mean, what got you interested?
Yeah, so about 4 or 5 months ago, I started researching an old Star Wars TCG, the one that was the Attack of the Clones. It released with the movie, and all the art was from the movie itself. Just because I was reminiscing about that, and I wanted to play a new card game. And I was wanting to create some ideas for a card game to maybe potentially create my own. And then researching that, I was like, let me see if there's like a new Star Wars TCG. And then I fell upon this. And I was like, let me check it out. I checked it out on Force Table, just playing the starter decks before I even really started diving in. And I was like, okay, this is really fun. I was like, let me check out some of the other leader cards and stuff. And next thing I know, I'm like, Tarkin was the first one that I fell on. I just was like, oh, I get +1/+1. That's neat. And inherently, I can +1/+1 something. That just felt cool. And then, little by little, I start learning, the meta game and how it has evolved. Because I wasn't from the beginning of the card game, but just seeing how Boba was like the deck to beat. So I immediately started plotting against Boba from that point.
And
I was like, well, that's what the deck to beat. So.
And you have a distinction. I mean, you have had success against Boba throughout the tournament. I understand.
Yeah, so I played 5 Bobas throughout the day, 3 in Swiss and 2 in top 16. And I beat all of the Bobas that I played.
All right, so that's not my experience piloting Luke into Boba. So, let's see if we can figure out how you did it. So, all right, let's talk about your deck. This is actually what you brought to the tournament itself. So.
Yep, this is the deck I played. Yep.
Why don't you run us through kind of the large picture? Why would you play a Luke deck? What kind of deck is it, and why does it appeal to you?
It appeals to me because I found out Luke works really well in the scenario of you can make a toolbox of cards, so everything kind of does its own thing. And then on top of that, Luke makes that card even better by being able to throw a shield on it. And I thought that the Alliance Dispatcher was an interesting card the first time I saw it, because I was like, ooh, a mana dork, from Magic. Those are always good.
I was going to say...
it felt bad and everything.
I often say bolt the bird, because if Luke puts out an Alliance Dispatcher and I'm playing Sabine or Turret, because Turret plays Sabine unit, but that's one of the few cards that I'll actually kill, as opposed to go for the base.
Yeah. Yeah, he can really push tempo a lot. I mean, you can bring a Kanan out on turn 2. You can bring a Bright Hope out on turn 2, which is really relevant against Sabine, because they start throwing A-wings at your face and then they wing leader it.
Mm-hmm.
You can throw Bright Hope into that immediately. You don't have to wait another turn and keep soaking up damage and risk them getting the initiative to push even more damage on turn 3. So Alliance Dispatcher is... Honestly, he's probably the MVP more than even I realize sometimes. That card is not dealt with. It just keeps cheating things out too. If he stays on board in the next turn 3, you cheat a Kanan out and he gets a shield, or you can throw out a Yoda with a shield turn 2, or an Echo-based Defender with a shield turn 2. He just helps you really utilize Luke's ability more too, because it gives you that 1 extra mana or 1 extra resource. that you wouldn't have otherwise.
And you'd agree with me that this is a mid-range deck?
Oh yeah, I would agree. This is definitely a mid-range deck. Like we were talking, it's a mid-range deck that is playing a war of attrition, essentially.
And
it is really its the victory.
Yep, and it has some ramp elements. I do see a resupply in there. It also has some control.
It does.
Some control elements, too. There's removal of some of it.
Yeah, it kind of has a little bit of, which is what I really like about the deck. It can it can play aggressor in certain matchups, and it can play defense. It can play control. It can kind of really adapt its strategy to whatever it is, and that's why I went with the deck, because I felt like it had really solid matchups against everything, and most importantly, it just has, in my opinion, a 60-40 against Boba. And you see the right stuff. Obviously, Boba can definitely beat you down because he has such good tempo cards, but if you see the right stuff, you can answer it every time.
All right, and you took a cue from our Palpatine Master, and you actually gave us an updated list with what you learned, too, so that'll be our last slide. But let's talk about some of the cards. All right, your leader. We don't need to read the card for this series. This is kind of geared towards the real competitive player. But I want to talk about the decision of to shield or not to shield, or to curve or not to curve, or however you want to put that thought process, because Luke, I think, gets an advantage of being able to, if he can save a mana, shield whatever just came in, so long as it's heroism. Yeah. Any thoughts for the aspiring Jedi on how to just make your decisions as to when to try to do that or when to push aggressively?
Yeah, so I found most of the time you're not too worried with this deck about taking initiative, because most of the time it will cost you initiative to put a shield on something. And the only time I find myself choosing to not go for a shield when I could have otherwise would be against Sabine in a lot of scenarios where it's like, okay, I can't let them keep hitting the gas. I have to get on top of this and just start mitigating some of the damage because the shield's not worth it in some cases. So there are cases where the shield's just not worth it. And you might can get some favorable trades otherwise, just with some nice statted minions. But yeah, I think Sabine's about the only deck, or Leia as well, or that random IG-88 maybe. Any of those real aggressive decks that can hit the gas really quick. They're the only ones that make you question whether the shield's worth it or not.
Right, because the aggro player is probably not going to hit your unit anyway.
Exactly. They're swinging through. They're ignoring you for the most part.
Do you put shields up against Vader?
I will put shields up against Vader. Obviously, what I would say was the more traditional idea of Vader prior to the tournament, for sure. Against the blue version, sometimes it's better to go ahead and take the initiative because you need to dodge like Power of the Dark Side or Takedown, or something like that, because you can actually dodge takedowns with Devotion on Kanan, which is really relevant. You can dodge Power of the Dark Sides with a lot of your like R2D2, or you can throw another Alliance Dispatcher out there real quick.
Yeah,
to defend from those cards.
And I don't think we put this card as one of the slides, but you do run Wing Leaders in your deck.
I'm sorry?
You run
Wing Leader?
Yeah.
Yeah, I run 3 Wing Leader, yep.
Yep, and that's a pretty good card against Villain Blue. You'd agree with me on that?
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It helps push the envelope of damage. It puts it turns the clock up on them a little bit quicker. And it really puts the pressure on, because outside of Fleet Lieutenant only gives you the buff one time. Wing Leader says you have to deal with this sooner rather than later.
And it gives you something to lose to Power of the Dark Side. I mean, they're not trying to power the Dark Side of the Wing Leader away, I think, typically.
Yep.
All right, so you identified this card as an outperformer throughout the tournament. Tell us how that went.
Yeah, so Devotion, a lot of people have questioned me on this card. and I think it's still really undervalued. But I think people are waking up to how good this card is. Just the Restore 2 alone is amazing. So, there were multiple times where this got thrown on a Yoda, and now Yoda's getting favorable trades because he's hitting that nice 3, that number 3 that they weren't expecting from him. And now he's restoring 4. And nobody likes seeing this on the Bright Hope either, because that thing is really hard to get rid of. And now it's 7, and potentially with a shield. And pretty much anytime this hits anything with a shield, Alliance Dispatcher got to see this a couple of times too. It was relevant for him to even hold it and start pushing some restore. And now he was before just kind of sitting there, useless at a certain point in the game. And now I get to apply more pressure with him because they're like, oh God, now that thing's restoring. I have to deal with it now.
And that's a great point. I really like the Bright Hope plus Devotion idea too, because
it feels
3 health is an extremely relevant number for anti-hero aggro. That's the health A-Wing has. That's what Red 3 has. Wing Leader has less. So a Bright Hope with Devotion, is probably restoring 2 all the time. Guy Cohen, who won the tournament, talked very highly about Devotion as, on an Inferno 4 as being what kept him in against some aggros. Did you play Sabine?
Yeah.
In the tournament?
I actually never played one Sabine the whole tournament. I skipped all of them. I hit all the Bobas instead.
Right. How do you feel your matchup is in Sabine?
It's not my favorite matchup. I think it favors Sabine a little bit more than me. I think it's really close though. I think it's like a 55-45.
And this is
it could be close to 50-50.
It's probably a card you're not resourcing against Sabine.
Oh no, I'm keeping that one, and sometimes even mulliganing for it.
Right.
So it's just too good.
All right, this was the second one you identified. The Bright Hope, which Tada, who was a Sabine player himself, really talked about in the mirrors, is making the difference. How did this play for you?
I would say this was probably the MVP of the whole day. Because when this comes out, against Boba specifically, there are times where you have to throw it down before the fire spray comes out because those 3/2 shieldeds coming through hurt. Even the cartel spacers can add up, and you just need to wall those off sometimes. But a lot of times I see myself waiting. I'm sorry?
How often do you use the wind plate of this?
I would say about 50% of the time, actually.
And what are your
actually does go?
What are your targets you're looking for? I think there's a couple of good ones.
So Alliance Dispatcher is something you don't mind leaving the board sometimes for a draw. R2D2 is another good one because it's like a lot of times he can come right back out and you can kind of filter a little bit more with R2. So you get the draw and then you get the filter, and it just really helps you reach the things you need. But really, just saving this thing for a Fet's fire spray. They're sometimes in their head they're calculating, okay, I'm getting the fire spray through, and I'm gonna put them on a clock, and then you answer it with this. Fire spray can't dispatch of it in one hit, and then it gets a shield after that. So now it takes 2 more hits.
And then maybe you pull back. Maybe you pull back a Wing Leader, and then the next turn, and it's hitting for 4, and it's doing lethal with that shield on the fire spray. But
yeah. Wing Leader landed on Bright Hope quite a few times.
Yep.
It was very relevant a lot.
Yep.
Like I said, Bright Hope overperformed.
Yep.
Sure.
And I think that this card too. Look for anything. We're having set 2 not that too far away. We had some cool spoilers from set 2 today that we were talking about before the show. But anything with a strong when played effect itself, like Wing Leader's, I think a good example. It's a card that you're playing for the when played effect. Bright Hope bringing it back just gives you more. It's got obvious synergy with Akbar. I think that's what it's meant to. But I see people.
Well, sadly, you cannot bring the Wing Leader back with the Bright Hope.
Oh.
I wish you could. It has to be a ground
unit. Has to be a ground unit. You're right.
That has to be a ground unit. But Wing Leader did land on a Bright Hope a couple of times through U-Wings and stuff like that. But yeah, if you could return Wing Leader with this card, it would be a whole nother game for sure. Then
Right.
this card would be so much more valuable.
Yep.
And it's already so valuable. But yeah, even bringing back, like I said, R2D2, Alliance Dispatcher, getting that draw. And like I said, I didn't play any Sabines that day, but I was really prepared to cheat this thing out turn 2 against a Sabine that was trying to go space with Dispatcher and just throwing this in their face and, locking them down for usually about 2 to 3 attacks, which feels good. And sometimes that buys you all the time you need.
All right. So Luke's mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yes, Obi-Wan.
So powerful card. I think it has some weaknesses. Why don't you talk about how Obi-Wan played through the tournament?
Yeah, so outside of Obi-Wan being my favorite Star Wars character of all time, he performed really well. Yes.
Hello there, General Kenobi.
So he did actually really well. This is a card that doesn't like to get waylaid. So obviously in the Boba matchup, you always have that bad feeling in your gut when you play this card. I have a bad feeling about this, when you play it. But he did get waylaid a couple times, but the times I really needed him to stick, you have to put in your head like their odds of having it are just the same of the odds of any other 3 of in the deck. They probably don't have it.
Right.
And you just have to play like that. You can't overthink it. So I threw it out, and it lands, and now it's a big wall that they have to deal with.
And sometimes you have to make them have it too, right?
Yeah.
I think that's something I've heard from other people who talked about it. I mean, it's maybe not, if you have a better thing to do with your 6 resources against Boba, I mean, you can try to play around it, but did you have a Boba yellow in this tournament that you faced?
No, I never ran into a Boba yellow. They were all Boba greens with ECL, all 5 of them. One of the guys I played twice, which was actually Randy, the guy I played in top 16. We played in round 7 of Swiss.
So that might change the decision, because at Boba yellow, at that point you're at 9 bounces, not 3. But
yeah, and we can talk about that too when we get to the new list, because I definitely perceive Boba yellow being the more prominent version because of Blue Vader. I think Boba yellow is going to be the play because of the hand control that they get with the Bodhi. And they can play Sparks, too, in that deck for 4, obviously. But they can still play that card, too, to take the hand control a little further.
If it takes their 1 win condition on a narrow deck like that, it's best 4 resources you spend. Here's a card that's a favorite of mine, Redemption. How did it go for you?
So there was one matchup in Swiss against Randy in our game 2, and this card won me the game in our first game. And based off the way he was playing, I was like, okay, I know he's going to hit the gas. I'm ready for the surprise strikes. And I opened up with this card, and I just held it the whole time. I was like, my whole goal in that game was to live until I can drop this. And I saw other things to mitigate damage, like Bright Hopes and Yoda and Devotion. That stuff was helping hold off too. And it just really did well. And what's crazy is I almost didn't play this card in the tournament. I didn't have 3 U-wing reinforcements, so I was like, I guess I'll just throw this in. So that was my decision behind that. And it really showed me throughout the tournament, yeah, you were wrong. Yeah. You should be playing this card at least at 1.
Yeah, and as a turret player, I mean, I think that this card does all sorts of things. Sometimes it's the heal that stabilizes you. It's always a Sentinel. It has the attack sufficient to kill fire spray. I don't know about the Rebel admirals putting the medical ship in as the Sentinel. I mean, that's an interesting military decision, but the card itself sure does what it's supposed to.
It does, yeah.
But yeah,
It draws attention.
right. Yeah, no, we'll put the wounded in front.
Yes,
Anyway, all right. So this
it
is
was from the sequels.
yeah, that's right. You know, maybe
That was
that
a sequel decision.
that Akbar guy, he didn't know anything.
Yeah,
All right, Consortium Starviper. This was in the board of your deck. Very popular card
yeah.
because it does a thing. When do you play it? When do you not?
I really just had this in the board and the sideboard for the Sabine matchup, which I never saw.
Mhm.
Because it's just nice against Sabine. Even without ECL, it's still good. It puts a body on the board that, with initiative restores. So Sabine doesn't like that. And sometimes they have to choose to trade into this. It takes out A-Wings. It takes out red 3s. That was my reasoning behind that.
Takes out an A-Wing and a red 3, maybe by restoring 4.
Oh.
How's it play into Boba?
I don't side it into anything except for the aggro matchups. So Leia, I would put this in against Leia as well.
Right.
But I think Sabine is really public enemy number 1 when it comes to the high-end aggression for sure.
And I think it's a really poor match into like a 7th Fleet Defender, is what I was getting at. And I mean, you got to be careful of when to play it and when not to.
Yeah, because 7th Fleet just takes it out.
All right.
For free, essentially.
So this is your boy, the Alliance Dispatcher. So, how often are you playing a shield on them if this is your turn 1 play?
Every time I'm playing a shield on it. I think there's like a 10% scenario where the Sabine player knows what you're trying to do, and they have a Sabine Wren like unit on board, and they're going to get a trade off of the shield, and they're like, okay, I just got to take the initiative and get the value immediately because they're going to kill it.
Yeah, and I mean a good Sabine player I think would. I mean, I play a lot of Turret, which runs Sabine unit. I mean, against a Luke, I'm looking for that Sabine unit because I'm anticipating this guy, trying to ramp. I mean, I've and it's real tough because if you're playing aggro, you don't want to be dealing with a Kanan on turn 2.
Yeah, and one funny thing is one of the Boba players, this card pushed advantage so hard game 1 that they chose when I played this to ECL a crafty smuggler into it.
I think that's a good play. I mean,
I think it is too, and I think it's a win for me in a way too, because I'm like, okay, now I don't have to worry about Steadfast, but at the same time, he doesn't have to worry about Kanan coming down or a Yoda with a shield coming down, stuff like that really swing the matchup very quickly.
Yeah, and we don't have a slide, I think, for Kanan. I mean, that's a very strong unit as a 4-drop. And his heals add up. I think they need to be respected.
They do. And just his mill alone sometimes can swing a matchup in your favor. Against one of the Boba players, I was like, oh, let's see what you mill. And it's a waylay off the top. And I'm like, that's my favorite card against Boba to see go off the top. I was like, because that card alone is what helps them break through. So if they're not seeing that card, that's 1 down I don't have to worry about.
Mm-hmm. All right, Colonel Yularen. Sideboard decision. Did you sideboard the Citadel?
My sideboard was really heavy for Sabine. Because I was expecting to see nothing but Boba and Sabine. My main deck, I don't side anything for the Boba matchup because I was like, that's the matchup you should already be ready for. You shouldn't be sideboarding in for that deck. That was my thought process, and I think it paid off very well. But this was just for the Sabine matchup. I play a lot of green stuff, so he gets a lot of heals in, and he really plays well into what my sideboard is for. So when Sabine sees me sideboarding in a ton of like 8 cards on him, it's right. Which I never sadly got to do. I did end up using my sideboard against Guy in top 4. I sided all 8 cards in just to try to swing little units in and get as many on the board as possible to swing damage and avoid. I was like, it's not ideal, but it's what I have at this point. So I was already blindsided by the Blue Vader. So I was like, this is what I have, and this is a better option than my main deck. So.
Yep. No, big threats don't work that great against that deck. Lots of little ones might.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a big threat. Home one. You had 2 of, and then 1 on the board.
Yep, I sideboarded 1 then.
Okay,
that was for.
Talk us through the.
So with home one, this card really can help. It doesn't necessarily close the game out right when it's played, but if you have a heavy board, like already, you have 3 or 4 things on the board already, which happens a lot, especially when they're just trying to fly into your base and avoid your units. Now every one of your units has Restore 1, and this thing can bring back a lot of very relevant targets. On 9 resources, you can bring back Bright Hope, you can bring back Kanan, which is really relevant. You on turn, on curve, you can bring back an Echo base to throw a defender out or a sentinel out on the ground. You can bring back a wing leader with it, and wing leader something on the ground that you need some stuff. It gives you the toolbox that this deck really works with, because it just lays a whole belt of tools at your disposal. So you have like Akbar, Fleet Defender, or Fleet Lieutenant, I'm sorry, Echo Base Defender, Yoda, Wing Leader. There's so many tools at your disposal when you play this card. Late game, you can bring back Obi-Wans, you can bring back Luke Skywalker. Which there were games where Luke Skywalker did get brought back, and I was building up the whole time to do that, to just swing the momentum. And it paid off a lot to do that.
Yeah, and then
so this card just really for that point, just to kind of give you a nice top off.
Yep. and there's nothing stopping you from then putting a shield on it after with your leader. I mean, so
exactly.
I mean, that can go, but it doesn't matter how you played the card. I mean, if it went into play, that turn, the Luke tap ability can do it. All right. U-Wing Reinforcement. How'd this play? What did you find yourself going for with this?
So this card really helped when you were looking at your hand, and you see, like, if you didn't have Luke in your hand, or you didn't have another, or you just really needed to go wide, or recover from a super laser blast even. I did beat an Iden, and this card helped me beat Iden. That's the only control matchup that I won that day. I lost to the Blue Vader and the Nick. Guy and Nick were the 2 people I lost to. I lost to Guy twice, once in Swiss and once in top 4. And I lost to Nick in round 8, the very last round. Really good tiebreakers, by the way. But they always had the answer for the U-Wing afterwards. But this card can help bring you back from a super laser blast and push that last little bit of damage that you were working for.
Yeah, and in any given Sunday, I mean, one of these times they won't have the answer. So
exactly.
I mean, you play the cards.
I went with the Iden.
And
they super lasered and U-Winged, and they're like, oh god, it just brought the whole board right back.
All right, so here's the new addition that you showed me, before. And before we get to your new list, you've added some Escort Skiffs. What's the reasoning there?
So this was in my sideboard as a 3 of for the Sabine matchup. As we've been speaking, that's my whole sideboard. So I'm actually putting 3 of this in the main board now, because I found that so it's no surprise that there's a lack of really good 4-drops in this game. And I have 2 really good ones in Kanan and Bright Hope, but sometimes you'll have Alliance Dispatcher and you'll find yourself like, okay, I don't have a really good follow-up for this. So this actually adds a consistency in making Alliance Dispatcher more relevant. And he goes hand in hand with this because he actually activates this as well, because he himself is a command unit. So this comes out swinging on turn 2, gets a nice trade, and it's typically always living to stick around as well.
Yeah, and A real good player, I know Wu values this card very highly. I think it's a dynamite draft card. I mean, if you can have all kinds of
Yeah,
ambush and draft, I mean, you're going to win. But
draft.
probably, one of the weaknesses of Hero Blue Green is lack of good early game removal. I mean, you don't have a Power of the Dark Side. You can cast for 3. But an Escort Skiff in the ground arena can do a similar thing.
Yeah, and I think just being able to cheat out a 4/4 that comes out swinging on turn 2 is extremely valuable because it adds pressure. It allows you to sometimes take the position of the aggressor after that as well, and now they have to deal with you, which is always a good position to be in.
Yeah, and I could see a play pattern of this answering a Sabine unit if they choose not to ECL to kill the Alliance Dispatcher, or they think you're going to put a shield on it, so they just play the unit.
Yep.
You follow it up with an Escort Skiff to crush their answer, and then at that point, they're going to still have to find a way to kill the Ramper, or they're going to be seeing Obi-Wan way before when they want to.
Yep. Yeah, this card, I was sleeping on it a little bit. I did see value in it. But I just, like I said, I would have put it in the main deck had I played with it more before the tournament. But I just undervalued it a lot, honestly.
Yep. So, with no further ado, here is the Luke Strikes Back. I like the name, Phil. Here. So, tell us about the adjustments that you made.
Okay, so the main adjustments I made, I took the Luke's lightsabers out. I think the card's really good, and I think there's still debate to use it. But I have found that putting in the Entrenched kind of in place of that, and I put Entrenched in as a 3 of, and I knocked Devotion down by 1. That's subject to change. But Entrenched is just a better version of the Luke Saber because it just is more relevant. You can throw it on R2D2. Mm-hmm. You can do the Luke Saber as well, but this gives him better stats, keeps him on the board longer. You can throw this on their units too in a lot of relevant situations. So it helps out that Blue Vader matchup, which is by far Luke's worst matchup is the blue control that are just kind of waiting for you to do stuff and basically answer you. So you can throw this on their Avenger late game, and it forces them to play another Avenger over it if they want to keep pressing damage, because they really don't have a ton of units to press damage. They're kind of relying on that Avenger.
Yep. And then you just got to finish the game. You got to be able to kill the Vader leader, but I mean, you have all kinds of things that can eventually get him. I think the trick is just not getting into Avenger lock. All right, what other adjustments did you make?
Yeah. Or I was going to say because of Avenger, he clears out everything on the ground of mine for Vader to just bypass. Mm-hmm. Because it's like the Avenger swings, I have to kill my nice ground unit. Now Vader is free to not take any damage again, and the damage gets overwhelming. But yeah. All right. So Spark of the Rebellion's card that I decided. I wish I would have been onto this card prior because this card is really, really powerful. Even though you're playing it for 4, it is relevant in every matchup just about. Sabine's about the only one it just kind of becomes an auto resource because you almost can't afford to play this against a Sabine, much like Resupply. But it's still worth main decking because like Boba hits their 5th resource. You can pull out Steadfast. You can pull out the Overwhelming Barrages. It's relevant there, but most importantly, it's relevant in that Vader matchup where they hit that 8th resource, or they're about to, and the only thing that's going to win them the game right now is a Super Laser Blast, and you're like, okay, if you have 2, you have 2, but let's see the hand, Right. It just allows you to kind of pick and choose like their tools out of their hand.
And I think it's something that's specific to maybe the May 4th, meta. We'll see what continues to evolve. I mean, I think that the upside Orlando is we saw some decks that didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, Luke Green didn't come out of nowhere. I know you were working on this for a long time, and we'll talk about that, before Vader Blue didn't either. I saw what they were doing for months before that event, George, getting that deck together. But it did have results that people weren't expecting if they were casually watching the game, by any means.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk about some matchups here. So first off, what is your game plan to Boba? What are you trying to do to beat that deck?
My game plan to Boba is to pretty much just out trade their units. So I'm getting shields. So I'm making sure that my trades are good. The restore helps swing back the life advantage in my favor, and it just keeps them from getting the math. Bright Hope is the star player in that matchup. If you don't see the Bright Hope, that matchup gets quite a bit harder. But they're also counting to see their fire spray. You have to take that into account as well. They're going to see their fire spray the same amount of time you're going to see your Bright Hope. And honestly, a lot of times you're seeing yours more because you have R2D2.
Right.
And R2D2 just helps you get through stuff, unless you see the tools you need. And I think a lot of people were on R2D2 in top cut, and I think R2D2 was a deciding factor for a lot of decks being in top cut at Kissimmee that day. So.
Yeah, and it's there's some synergy with Luke because Luke can give him a shield. I mean, I'm glad you talked about entrenched on R2. I think that's one of the big entrenched targets against aggro. I mean, shielded entrenched R2 is going to be able to keep the ground arena clean until you get to your hitters.
Yeah. 4 is a very relevant number. It clears K2s before they get going. It's just really relevant for R2 with that entrenched. He's hitting all the math you really need for all the trades. And he stays. He's getting multiple trades. Right. And he's just helping you look through your deck every time.
And I think that the best card for removal in Boba Green is Overwhelming Barrage, which is sick a bunch of attacks. One reason Luke does well is that the shields are the counter to Barrage.
Yep.
So you can't.
That's a good point, and that's one thing I think my opponents. I could almost see it on their face when we got to that resource 5, and they're like, "Oh, that has a shield and that has a shield."
Right. I can kill R2.
Put it all on R2.
Yeah, I can kill R2.
Yeah.
Because I knocked his shield off before, but it's a relevant thing. And then Luke, once he gets out, can make more shields. What about
exactly?
What about the Sabine matchup? You didn't run into it in the tournament. You tested for it?
I did test for it. That was the main deck that I tested for because that was honestly the matchup that scares me the most in a lot of ways, just because they can hit the gas so hard. And even when you do finally get control of them, sometimes just the little bit of pings they can continuously do. For a cause and K2 are really scary cards late game because they sneak in damage that you just can't do anything about. So that's really what makes that matchup scary. So you want to stay out of that for a cause range as much as possible. So your whole point is similar to the Boba matchup. Really, Luke's entire strategy is control the board. It's an attrition war, so you want to get nice trades without having to lose a unit. So you're taking a unit while you save yours, and so you can get to your late game stuff. Because once Luke Skywalker can hit the board or Home One can hit the board against those decks, it's pretty much game over.
Yeah,
at that point.
Yeah, if you can stick a guy that hits for 6 and restores 3, I mean, at that point, Sabine's probably not going to win. I mean, even if she brought some wolves to deal with it for a little bit, they run out.
Yep.
So, and I think that is right.
Lukey.
And even like the little blue spaceship that restores 1.
Yeah. Restored Arc.
Yep. That with a devotion.
Yep.
Answers A-Wing and is now restoring 3 every turn, which is.
Yep. And
what a K-do.
Which was really relevant. It was very relevant with the devotion because, like I mentioned earlier, I had Tarkin was kind of my first deck I really put a lot of time into in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I like Tarkin, because I was like, okay, so he's kind of a monster. Tarkin can throw out a TIE fighter around turn 1 and turn it into a 3/2, and that gives you, that makes the space, they don't want to mess with space anymore. So in a sense, I was like, this kind of gives me that same mobility with Restored Arc. It's kind of like it gives you that perfect math you need against that matchup. And you're restoring 3 now because Restored Arc. And honestly, that made me want to play Alliance X-Wing also. But I was like, I think I'm just overthinking it at that point because I think Alliance X-Wing is not optimal. But I was like so scared of the matchup, I thought maybe if I can just fit that in, that would give me a better matchup. But I just was like, no, let's focus on the Boba. We'll sideboard for the Sabine, which could be different now. I think Sabine is going to be probably more well represented than Boba in the upcoming tournament. So that's just my prediction, because I feel like people are so scared of that Blue Vader deck that they know Sabine is one of the few things that can really run it down quick. And, because the ping keeps going afterwards versus Leia, if she gets taken control of, she doesn't have the ping anymore. So I think Sabine was definitely going to be a lot more relevant in the upcoming meta. At least if I were an aggressive player, that would be what I would go to.
Or Leia. I think Leia has the ability to run Tarkin Town, which at least deals with Childson once.
That's true. Good point.
All right, so control. Villain blue-green control. This can be Iden, this can be Krennic, this can be Palp blue. What's your game plan there?
So now with my new deck, obviously Spark of the Rebellion is a card I'm looking for. Main 2, and I side the 3rd one in. And Entrenched is also a relevant thing against those for when they drop the big ships. I'm just like, okay, ignore the Space Arena, throw this on Avenger, force them to play another Avenger. So that's my main deck options for that. Also, the Escort Skiff helps push aggression a little bit more as well. And those matchups helps me get just more units on board in general to get them to the late game to where I can end the game. But with my sideboard, like I said, I do play one more of the Spark of Rebellion in my sideboard. And for the Palpatine in general, I decided, I was like, maybe I'll just sideboard 2 Change of Heart. Because I noticed when I was playing Nick, he put me in a position to where he never had to deploy his Palp because he was waiting to take my Luke or my home 1.
Right.
And I was like, if he takes this, the game is over for me. So I just had to hold it the whole time. So I was like, okay, if I just sideboard the 2 Change of Heart, I can still play the unit. He'll have to play his Palp. He'll take my unit. I can Change of Heart it, get it right back, and I get to keep it because Change of Heart returns it back to the owner afterwards. So, and it actually works that way with Traitorous as well, which is relevant.
Waylay works that way too.
Yep.
So I don't know if people always get that, but you can waylay your fire spray back to yourself. All right, what about...
Which is relevant.
Yeah. What about the hard controls? I mean, Vader blue, Iden red is another iteration of that.
I think ultimately, as a Luke player, if you're taking Luke to a tournament, you just have to kind of accept that's going to be a really hard matchup. At least I haven't found the exact answer. Spark of Rebellion is the main answer. You wait, like I said, wait for the Super Laser Blast turn. If they're counting on that card to win them the game, Spark of the Rebellion can win you the game because now you've taken their only out to clearing your board, and you're forcing them to have to play their Vader unit and start out some things. Because a lot of times they'll just hold the Vader unit and they'll hold the Avenger until they can Super Laser Blast. So you force them in a position to play them without the Super Laser Blast.
And they have bad matchups too, that are like that. I think hand attack Han. Exactly. Han, there was a great top 16 deck that was a Han red that was all just going at hand destruction. That's going to be a nightmare for a control deck like that. And Sabine red, I mean, is not the most played Sabine, but I mean, there's some things there that make it real good against what they're trying to do against aggro. So it's a mark of a balanced game that everybody has a kryptonite. Right.
Yeah, I love that this game doesn't have one deck that just can be the boogeyman and nothing can answer it.
Right.
So, I think as a Luke player, that's just that part. You have to accept what you are Luke against. You can kind of play to where, well, I can win this matchup 35 to 40% of the time. And I think that's pretty good for a bad matchup.
Right.
Obviously, there's a lot of variables and mathing to do, but Spark of the Rebellion is the answer. And I know some people, I'm in a Luke mid green chat on TTI, Take the Initiative, and also on like the main Star Wars board.
Yeah, with my boy Riku, right? I know he's a Luke aficionado.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's really on regional governor. He's really on that card. I personally don't like that card in Luke, but he sees success with it. But that is another tool for all the Luke players out there that you can use. I've never felt good using it because I feel like I think it is relevant, but I think Spark of Rebellion just does the job better because it just does away with what you want to get rid of. Regional governor says like you're just delaying the inevitable, and you kind of feel like you did nothing when you play that little 1/4 late game, because that's just my player preference. I think the card is very good.
And do you adjust the deck to your personal playstyle? Is that something that you think is a good idea?
Yeah, I think that is a good idea, and I think Luke is one of those decks. I think as a Yu-Gi-Oh player who played toolbox decks, like you have all these like 1-ofs and 2-ofs that can just do all this crazy stuff. You have a little bit of something for everything. I think that's what makes Luke really strong, is he kind of can play into anything.
Yep.
And given some of his matchups might not lean in his favor, but he can actually overcome any matchup with the right tools.
All right. So I do want to talk about some of the other people have done the tournament itself. In the weeks preparing for a tournament like this, I mean, this was the largest American tournament on Star Wars Unlimited to date. What were you doing to get ready?
So, shout out to the Take the Initiative League. There's a lot of really good players in that league. And I was in that league for about a month prior to this tournament. So I was going into league matching, so where I knew people were really wanting to be as competitive as possible. And I was taking in, my Tarkin deck and my Luke deck and kind of testing them against people that were being as serious, they want to get in that top 16. And that wasn't necessarily my goal. My goal was to press these decks into people who are thirsty to win.
Right.
So it really helped me test the decks, tweak the decks, and it really helped me really just get Luke down to where I felt really comfortable with the deck. I was like, okay, I'm beating Boba like 70% of the time. I'm still losing games and I'm still losing matches, but my win rate against Boba was just so high, and all the really high level players in there playing Boba, I feel like I really ran through the Bobas and Kissimmee because I felt like they weren't the same caliber as the Boba players that I was playing against. They were like the top 16 players, Randy and I'm forgetting the guy I played in top 8. They were really good. But I feel like all the practice I put in just put me kind of another level above them because I had played that matchup so much.
Yeah, and a shout out.
I almost knew exactly what they were going to do every time.
A shout out to Rebel Trader and the Take the Initiative guys for running that league. I mean, they do a great job. I mean, you're also part of the main community Discord, you said, and bouncing ideas off other Luke Green players.
Yep.
There's other options.
A lot of good ideas from those guys.
Yep. So, I mean, I think it's about find a community. I mean, if you want to play online, you can play online. If you want to go drive an hour to get to a local every day. I mean, there's a lot of places in America where you can do that. If you want to look at other, communities, there's some web apps. I mean, Force Table is okay for like your first test of a deck, but it's not going to make you tournament ready.
Yeah, it definitely.
But find a way to play games and, want to get better, right? All right.
And I'll say TTS is a really good source for that because it makes you. A lot of people complain with it being manual, but I think the fact that it is manual, it dials you in more to the deck you're playing. It makes you make the action, and you're not like relying on the generated outcome to tell you what's going to happen. You actually have to know prior the interaction. So I think that's really important too. And just shout out to the community of the game as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like the community is amazing.
All right. What about the day of the event itself? Any tips for somebody looking to do well?
I would say pack a hot dog with you.
Yeah. So I talked about this with Nick. I mean, the venue did not allow any outside food in and actually had security, looking at bakes and stuff. It's not directly on the tournament organizer. I think PPG did a great job, but I mean, I don't know how you.
PPG did.
But I just feel for all the players there, 15 hours, and they're expecting you to try to eat, especially a deck like Luke Green. I mean, you are going to have pretty long games, a lot of the times if you're not playing a Sabine. I mean, and it's hard to keep your stamina up itself. And
like me and Randy's top 16 game that was streamed. Me and him were both feeling it. Game 1 we got through. I had my up. But game 2 I was losing it. I'm like, okay, my mind started skipping a little bit.
And I think it was probably both ways, given a couple of the decisions there, because I watched, I watched a lot of that stuff. But I mean, if you aren't well fed, I mean, if you aren't drinking water throughout, I mean, you're not going to perform very well because your brain's not going to work as good. So it's really a shame, if you don't have the ability to bring in a granola bar. I eat bananas when I play. I'll have a pack of bananas in whatever bag I brought because they keep me there. But hopefully that doesn't become commonplace in the community. I mean, I really think people ought to be comfortable when they play.
I think, try to pack some snacks to any big tournament you're going to do because of that reason. And hopefully you don't get caught with them because $8 hot dog didn't feel too good, but it was something.
Yeah.
And also just find something to do in between games that kind of gets you in a good headspace. I'm the type of person, when I'm done with my match, I'm going to talk with people.
I can see that about
I'm
you.
just the type of person to where my mind just goes and goes and goes. So like it almost never has a break. So like even when I'm at work, I'm thinking in my work mindset, I'm thinking about optics. And then when that break comes, my brain's going to jump right to, I wonder if I should I bring R2 down to a 2 of in my deck? And then I'm thinking out scenarios, and then I go right back to this brain, and I go back to this brain. So talking through stuff just helps my mind stay sharp. Some people like to go get some solitude and just rest for a second and just have a moment of peace. That's not me. I like to roll around in the chaos.
There you go. All right. Did you take any notes during the tournament?
I didn't take any notes. I did note like my matchups, like what I played against. But I can remember a lot of it pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
My matchups, my hardest matchup all day long that I won was against a Chewbacca, actually, in round 1. So shout out to Colby, the Chewbacca player. I made a good friend out of him that day as well. Super friendly guy. I beat him game 1. Game 2 was coming down to time, and we knew if we tied that they were going to double loss us. So we kind of looked at the board, and we couldn't see who the inevitable winner was going to be, and he was very honorable, and he said, you know what? I don't think there's any way I beat you in a game 3, so I'm just going to give you the 2-0 because I don't think a double loss is fair for either of us. And that was very honorable of him. come to that conclusion, because we were kind of in a spot where we had so many units on the board. Both had a home one. We're just restoring and swinging and restoring and swinging, and it was just chaos. So he's like, "Yeah, I can see you can get it."
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so
Very admirable.
Yep. Thank you so much for doing the masterclass with us. I'm glad we were able to connect through the main Discord. A shout out to the fella on the KTOD Discord that let me know your name so that we could connect. That's actually how I find you. But for the audience here, I mean, anybody looking to play this deck, any final thoughts to leave them with? Words of wisdom from Master Luke.
Be patient.
Mm-hmm.
Don't try to win the game quickly. You have to be patient.
He's a plotter and a shield.
It's the way of.
All right. Thank you very much, Phil. Everybody who listened this far, thank you for checking us out. You're our hero. And check out our other masterclasses. And good luck on May 4th, Phil. I hope to see more success.
Oh, thank you. I hope to see some of you guys at Richmond.
I'm not making the Richmond one because I got a tournament, by me and a family obligation, but we'll catch you at Gen Con maybe.
Yep.